what is factually now understood by the right folks in the government, as Peter said, even the president, foreign interference in our election assisted by domestic accomplices. And I know there is somebody who was very close to Chavez. I mean, somebody like a national security advisor type level to Chavez, who's in U.S. custody. This person is naming names. One of those names was the head of Dominion, as far as people who were doing. Soros was another one.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us once again on the State of Freedom.
The State of Freedom is a listener-supported podcast. We're committed to pursuing the truth about policymaking, decisions, and situations in Louisiana and at the national level that stand to impact our freedoms.
Please become a monthly supporter of the State of Freedom at freedomstate.us as we continue to expand the voice of liberty across Louisiana and beyond.
If you're looking to invest in physical precious metals or convert your 401k to a precious metals backed IRA, please consider making your investment with our trusted partner, Metal Stacks. Their prices regularly beat the big sites and they have no credit card fees or minimums. Shipping is free for orders over $500. Just visit metalstacks.com/dwalker or get there from our website, freedomstate.us. If you're interested in the IRA conversion, drop me a message at Danielle at freedomstate.us and I can get you connected with their white glove service. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the State of Freedom, where we're grounded in faith and the Constitution, where we're committed to the core principles of giving voice to truth, living with courage, and taking action. It's Thursday, October 2nd. Hard to believe. It's 10 a.m. Central. I'm Danielle Walker, and I'm joined by my good friend and co-host, Chris Alexander, who's doing all this. Yeah. Hey, good morning, Chris.
Good morning.
We're coming to you live on Voice of the People USA TV and Radio Network on Rumble, X, YouTube, and Facebook. If you're catching us later, you can listen to us on our podcast platforms like Spotify and Apple and wherever else you like to catch your podcasts. And we would love it if you'd share, give us a like, give us a thumbs up, leave comments. We want to hear what you're thinking.
During the show. During
the show as well. Absolutely. And joining us today is our friend Matt Meck. He's basically been with us from the beginning of the State of Freedom. And if you're ever wondering why we have such great guests, it's the grace of God and Matt Meck. Those are the two primary ones responsible for the amazing guests we have on this show. Matt, as you know, is involved with a lot of election integrity efforts, and he is the host now of On Tap with Patriot Party News on Rumble. I know I left out a lot of the things that you are involved in, so you can fill in the blanks here in a second. But let me get into the scripture of the day. And I'm sure there's plenty of stuff that you don't want us to know that you're involved with. But the scripture of the day today is Hebrews chapter 4, and it's verses 1-3. And it says, "Now God has offered to us the same promise of entering into his realm of resting and confident faith. So we must be extremely careful to ensure that we embrace the fullness of that promise and not fail to experience it. For we've heard the good news of deliverance just as they did, yet they didn't join their faith with the word. Instead, what they heard didn't affect them deeply, for they doubted. For those of us who believe, faith activates the promise and we experience the realm of confident rest. For he has said, 'I was grieved with them and made a solemn oath. They will never enter into my calming rest of the Spirit. God's works have all been completed from the foundation of the world.'" And that scripture was for me this morning, if anybody was wondering. We can rest in the confidence that all of the Lord's work is already accomplished. He's not scurrying around, reacting to the news and reacting to phone calls. He's not trying to put our lives together to meet some deadline like a last-minute art project. He's not worried about anything. His promise of deliverance and salvation is already done. It's been done since the foundation of the world. Our job is to do what he called us to do and to rest in confident faith. It's our faith that activates the promise of salvation. It's our faith that gives us confidence that he will do what he said he will do because he's already done it. So don't miss your blessing because of unbelief. Don't miss out on the opportunity to experience the fullness of the Lord's salvation because of unbelief. James 1, 6 through 8 says it this way, and he's talking about the way that we pray. He says, just make sure you ask empowered by confident faith without doubting that you will receive. For the ambivalent person believes 1 minute and doubts the next. Being undecided makes you become like the rough seas driven and tossed by the wind. You're up 1 minute, tossed down the next. When you're half-hearted and wavering, it leaves you unstable. Can you really expect to receive anything from the Lord when you're in that condition? So let me encourage all of us today, myself at the front of the pack on this one. Let's discipline our minds and refuse to waver or to allow doubt to come in about the goodness and faithfulness and finished work of the Lord in our lives.
That is extraordinary, Danielle. That is, and it is the finished work. He has won the victory, and that is exactly why we can have confident rest, even as we work, even as the world swirls around us. We can have a center of serenity. It reminded me, Danielle, when I studied with the Jesuits, one of the Jesuit mottos is to be contemplatives in action. To be contemplatives, which implies a certain serenity even while you are acting, because we're anchored in Christ and in his finished work.
That's
and
good.
We are not moved about like waves because of whatever the circumstances are. That is so powerful and such a great reminder to me personally. And someone who, no matter what's going on in his life, and I guarantee you he's juggling many, many balls every single day, but always seems to have a cheerful outlook, lives on the sunny side of life, and always seems to be just moving ahead like a barn buster, is Matt Meck, the former Marine who's with us today. And Matt, before we get started, I have to just, as I told you pre-show, I have to admire your tapestry. As you know, my dad was a U.S. Marine, and that tapestry behind you is exactly like the one that he had. The very first thing that he ever told us when we were growing up was that one of my brothers said, "Pop, you're an ex-Marine, right?" And he looked at him and said, "You know what? I'm not going to take any kind of corporal punishment against you for that statement, but I will remind you once that there's no such thing as an ex-Marine. We're former Marines, and we have a temporal and eternal bond that will live forever." So God bless you for your service in the U.S. Marine Corps, Matt. And what a pleasure to have you with us, sir.
Thank you. There's a joke on the 8th day God created the Marines. And in our hymn,
They're a different animal, huh? Different animal.
We
Yes.
do protect the pearly gates. For the Marine Corps hymn. So that's kind of drives me. I think I was telling you before the show started. I had a gentleman officer I knew as a colonel when I was in earlier, and then he became a 3-star general. I was retired, and he grabbed my arm and he said, "Just remember, you're still a Marine. You're just serving in a different capacity."
I love that. That's just so beautiful. So anyway, a true warrior with us. Matt, I want to start here with a topic that certainly is of keen interest to our listeners, and I believe at this point to conservatives across America who view her as an American patriot and an icon, and that is Tina Peters. And I know you're familiar with her case. The last we heard about what was going on with Tina Peters a couple of weeks ago was that there was a disagreement over the Trump DOJ and the Colorado Attorney General about whether or not she should be provided a post-conviction bond while her appeal is winding its way through the process. The position of the AG is that she has a constitutional right to a post-conviction bond. The position of the AG is that it's a state court prosecution at any rate, and it's our discretion whether to award that. And so we don't know what's going on there. And most recently, August 21st, Trump came out, and you know what he said on Truth Social. She's an American patriot. She's old. She's not in good health. Either you get her out or we're going to take some harsh actions. What are you hearing about Tina at this point? And can we get this American patriot out of jail?
Well, first I'll let the audience know, come tomorrow, she will have been in prison for 1 year. 1 year tomorrow. And where she's in, there's not like you typically see in the male side where you've got a penitentiary, a medium, a low, so forth. She is in with some very bad people, and she's in general population. The updates that I know is that one that her team was working the hardest on. They just had not too long ago, a hearing in Colorado in a federal court on her writ of habeas corpus.
Well, that's what it was, and I should have said that. Yeah, it was the writ is where they're arguing whether or not the Constitution requires a release. Exactly right.
And so they had a great hearing per Peter Tickton and the legal team. And as I was telling Danielle before the show started, he and Stephanie Lambert were on our show last night. We can get into some of the things he said there, which were very, very significant. But they're waiting now. The federal judge gave the AG of Colorado was like 14, I think, to the end of this month, end of last month. So they should have that response from the state AG, the federal judge for the federal judge to adjudicate if he has proper jurisdiction to rule on the habeas corpus petition. Now, I do know also something that Peter has said. He said it on our show last night. He said it on Emerald Robinson's show 2 or 3 days ago. He said it on Bannon's show that same day in the evening. He said they had a plan in place, and the deputy AG, Todd Blanche, has blocked it. And he went on to say, Todd Blanche, who I don't know, and he said he doesn't know, but he can see what's going on. And it's interesting, because Peter has known Trump since they were like 15, 17 years of age. Matter of fact, he said last night on the show, the day Kennedy was assassinated, the person one row up, I think, and one row over for him, they were in American history class at that military academy, was Donald Trump, right?
Wow.
And he indicated for pardons, because no pardons have happened since May. On the Tina thing, that was a go for something that the federal government was going to do, evidently, on her birthday. And with election security measures, it's all being blocked, per Peter Tickton, at Todd Blanche, who was the Deputy Attorney General.
Matt, do you think that, last week or maybe 2 weeks ago, time is a little fuzzy, Trump came out and made a big statement that Pam Bondi needed to basically get off her duff and do some indictments, and then the Comey indictment got rolling from there. Do you think that same, that's Trump saying, hey, I see that you're not doing what I've asked you to do, or do you think that's a separate matter?
Personally, I think it is him seeing that, and I think he sensed frustration, and I can't tell you the source, but I was told the Comey indictment was done over the objections of Bondi and Blanche.
Wow.
What's going on?
Wow.
Any idea
Remember,
what's going on?
Trump really had to get involved, and like, Pam, what's going on? Why do we have this person that was going to be the U.S. attorney who, doesn't really comply with our vision? So he had to get involved and push that, made sure, I'm using presidential authority, push that person out. He got the, I forget her name, but she was an attorney in the White House. And in 3 days, she got that dang indictment done. And, and it's interesting. I mean, it's probably the least egregious things that Comey's done, what he's charged for. And I can think of seditious conspiracy as one that I think that most people would say he's involved with. And Peter Navarro said today earlier on Bannon, he goes, this guy's charged with 2 felonies, and they're treating him very nicely, and he's got time to report. And he goes, I was charged with a misdemeanor, and they grabbed me at the gangway at Reagan Airport in handcuffs and shackles. He goes, so no, Trump is not weaponizing the government against his political enemies. That's what Biden did. He said Trump is weaponizing the government against those criminals who weaponize the government against the American people.
Yeah.
So is there a rift between President Trump and Blanche and even, Pam Bondi at this point about, well, I guess specifically the charges that were actually brought against Comey? And is it your view that the charges brought against him were actually relatively innocuous compared to the legitimate crimes for which he could have been charged?
That could be. I don't know. I can't tell you firsthand. What folks have indicated to me is that maybe Comey's actually working with. It's in exchange for something a little less egregious, you get some information. Kind of like, Rudy talked about when you build a RICO case, right? You go for the lowest hanging fruit, and you get those with the least stamina to flip, right? And to talk about their others. But here's what I think, and Peter Tickton talked about it in more detail last night. He said he truly believes Pam Bondi is completely aligned with Trump politically and philosophically, and that she loves Trump. He has a concerns with Todd Blanche, and as I'm learning about how the DOJ works, I guess Pam is more like the CEO, and Todd would be the COO, right? The DAG
Okay.
runs the day-to-day operations of the Department of Justice. But he was indicating that, this is Peter, that I'll put it in context. He goes, he was in that military academy with Trump, I think, several years. Said Trump was like the captain of the battalion or something, and Peter was his sergeant, and they passed inspections all the time, really good. And he goes, do you know how many times I saw Donald Trump raise his voice or lose his temper or anything like that? And he goes, and this is like we're 17, hormones are raging at 17. He said zero times did I ever see him do that. And he said, if the one thing I'd say, this is Peter, is that the president has can have a blind spot when he puts trust in somebody, and sometimes that might be his Achilles heel. Is he's so good of a person, he's trusting even when the people he trusts sometimes maybe are taking advantage of that trust.
That's a great
Peter was
point.
intimating last night.
That's a great point. And even though their personalities are very different, you just piqued me. I don't know why. It just reminded me. It's sort of the way Robert E. Lee was during the Civil War with his own generals. That he was such a trusting person and such a great man that he oftentimes was a little naive when it came to whether or not his subordinates were actually doing what they were supposed to be doing for him, and the extent to which they are actually being loyal to the agenda. That's just an example that popped into my head. But
and
let me just ask you. Yeah,
as I say, Chris, confuses me because I'm sitting there in the Marine Corps context of my background, and I'm going, when you have someone in your command, your chain of command, they report to you. If they're not complying with the commander's intent, that's what we call it in the military, commander's intent, the vision, as long as it's lawful and all those very important caveats, you comply. And if you can't comply, you have the boss has you in for a meeting, and you get an attitude adjustment. Interestingly, Peter said he doesn't think Todd can have an attitude adjustment. He said it's not going to work. He was intimating he's got to be replaced. But you call him in, and then if you continue not to do what the commander has let out as his vision, you're let go, right? And the next person gets in there, and that's what Peter asked. He asked our audience and others, and I would ask your audience. He said, get on to Trump's Truth Social. And he goes, Trump's not the problem. He goes, Trump is a great man. He said, I've known him since I've been a teenager. He said, but let him know, the grassroots, what is going on. And you should mention his name. Peter Tickton, sir. We saw Peter on these various shows talking about Todd Blanche, and ask him why is Todd Blanche seemingly blocking your agenda from being fulfilled in DOJ.
Yeah. And what comes to mind as well, now that we're in this government shutdown, Trump has a whole lot of leeway to make personnel changes at will without any blocks. So I think it'll be a very interesting time to see how some pieces are moved around the deck.
Yeah. Matt, Danielle said earlier pre-show something that I didn't even know, that Todd Blanche does have connections with Colorado. Maybe he was raised there, originally from there. I don't know exactly, but I do think he has a background that is connected to Colorado. If, in fact, he is blocking action on Tina Peters' release, do you think it could be in part political because of his connections and his relationships with authority figures in Colorado?
I don't know. And that's, I think it's some of the three most underused words in the chain, right? I don't know, is because, Mike Davis, who is no lightweight, and he's a viceroy, and he equally is an advocate for Tina is being grossly mistreated for no crimes. He took umbrage with the attacks on Blanche. And he says, Blanche is doing some good things, stop the circular firing squad. So I don't know what's going on there, but I don't know if Blanche has connections there. It's something Peter said, if that's influencing his decisions. But Peter said last night, he said, as an example, and it's going to be extreme, but he was using these, I'm going to use them. He said, like folks who want to lower the population to 500 million or so because of their fealty to the green revolution. And they don't care if people die or abortions or anything like that. They think they're doing good. We think they're evil. They think they're doing good. And he said, so his interpretation, Todd Blanche is doing what he thinks is the right thing to do, even though that philosophy does not line up with what Trump's wanting to do, seemingly. And Peter, if you've watched Peter on various interviews and so forth, and people who know Peter, kind of like with President Trump, very nice guy, very, very easy to talk to. He was out here for the 9/10 August event at the Ahern that the Gateway Pundit put on. Wonderful man, level-headed, calm, cool, collected. And he said, I never usually do this. I don't go out and talk about this, but I'm seeing this, and this has got to be made known that in his mind, Blanche is blocking Trump's agenda. He's seen it, and I've seen it from some folks at DOJ who are frustrated. They know they've been given great jobs, great responsibilities, and they haven't been able to execute on those responsibilities because they haven't been given the requisite authority, dollars, and people to implement said responsibility.
If Blanche is impeding the effort to get Tina Peters released, any insights or speculation on why he would be doing that? We do know that he was a Democrat until 2025, apparently. But we also know that he defended President Trump's criminal case in New York City. He's also defended Rudy Giuliani. He defended Paul Manafort. So, there's certainly not clear evidence that his political ideology in any way would be what's impeding him or even his immediate background. But if you had to say, if he is in fact doing this, why would he be doing this?
I'll take the devil's advocate route just for a second. And maybe with his knowledge, background, maybe he sees a different solution than what has been offered. Or maybe he thinks he's being loyal to Trump so that you're not, I'm just being devil's advocate, so you're not ready, shoot, aim, you're ready, aim, shoot. That's the only thing I can think of, because it seems to have stopped a lot of the inertia that was going on in DOJ on these other things. I mean, they're doing other things wonderfully. They're in Memphis, DOJ is working with Secretary of War and helping, and Pam with the activating the Joint Terrorism Task Force. So, to struggle for answers, my thoughts are, I'm not looking for duplicity or nefarious perspective, but he might have a different philosophical approach to something. But equally, I would say, even when you're doing that, you work at the pleasure of the president. And the president, if you are not, he obviously was frustrated because he kind of unloaded on Pam. And again, I'm hearing it from a second source. After that unloading on Pam, Susie Wiles had said, you really don't want to do that in that manner. So you had one immediately thereafter that kind of gave her top cover. But I think his frustration is rising that, put in our own lives. You have a dear friend or a family member that you're close with, and you're asking them to do something, and they're repeatedly not doing it. At some point, you still love them, but you're like, what the hell why are you not doing this? And sometimes maybe, and it's harder when it's a friend, it's harder when there's a close rapport there. You say, hey, this job and what I need you to do, it's not working out, but you know something? Let me make you ambassador to Finland and go have a nice life.
Yeah. Let him save face a little bit, and then get him out of there. And to play devil's advocate just for a second along with you here, Matt, the Colorado Attorney General does have at least a facially credible argument that this was a state court prosecution. It's a state court conviction, and the Attorney General in Colorado has plenary authority about how to conduct this case, both during the trial and the prosecution and post-conviction. They rarely grant post-conviction habeas relief in Colorado. And maybe Todd Blanche is thinking that, and this sort of alludes to what you said earlier, maybe he wants to avoid potentially embarrassing President Trump by moving forward at head speed and then losing and then losing and having the Colorado AG vindicated. So maybe there is something to what you're saying, and maybe he is considering another route that he thinks could be more effective. So I guess at this point, I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt and not conclude that he's simply not being loyal to President Trump's agenda.
Yeah, yes, I mean, and I think that's
I do want to weigh in with one thing. Sorry, Matt. Go ahead. I think there's a little bit of a delay between us.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that one thing that comes to mind, when Trump said that he wanted Tina out, he talked about there being swift consequences if they didn't get Tina out of prison. So part of me wonders if there's some kind of calculus here for the consequences to come before the release, so that the release can happen with some free will from the Colorado side because Trump has put the squeeze on him.
It's very possible. And, it's like an iceberg, right? We're just seeing the top of this, and so much is happening below the surface. And I wonder, I mean, Chris, your legal background, I think Bannon had just gotten out of prison, again, for a misdemeanor. He's in a low for a misdemeanor. I think Jeff Clark had remoted in. I think Mike Davis was in studio, and Pat McSweeney, who's also on Tina's legal team, and he was a Nixon lawyer back in the Watergate era, and he was in DOJ with Bork at the time. All three of those attorneys said Colorado is bizarro world. The person who was enforcing federal and state law by backing up data is in prison. The people who did the trust to build and destroyed evidence, destroyed records, are the ones charging her, and she was never able to offer that as a defense. And every one of those, every attorney I've talked with, Peter Tickton included, said they've never seen, in her case, a judge more biased and more egregiously unprofessional than the judge who sentenced her and presided over her trial.
Great point, Matt. I have seen judges at sentencing in the worst, most heinous criminal cases you can imagine. I'm talking about cases, serious sexual offenses involving minors, brutal murder cases, where the judge has not been as harsh on a defendant as this judge was with Tina Peters. It certainly betrays a political agenda there. There can be no question about that.
I agree. And a lot of the folks, Danielle and Chris, that have been briefing Tulsi Gabbard, and certainly the president now has all this. A lot of things going on behind the scenes. Every one of them will say that Tina's heroic efforts led them to the Rosetta Stone that allowed them to help go where to look. So, and this is a unanimous position against very credible people who have been investigating and working on this, and now have gotten all that information into Tulsi. And I shared with Peter last night, I said, isn't it interesting, say for Pete Hegseth, of all the cabinet officers or officials, the two people who were really, in my estimation, exemplifying intestinal fortitude, or as Admiral Robinson said, certainly with Tulsi, she's got balls of brass, is Tulsi Gabbard and Kennedy, both former Democrats who were just trying to do the right thing. And Tulsi is being exceedingly targeted and blocked. And I understand that, when she was trying to get all the information to Trump, and folks in the intel community, CIA specifically, want a lot of stuff done. The DIA general who got fired, Cruz, I think his name was, he was trying to block this election stuff, our own IC's involvement in the manipulation of our 2020 election to Trump. Flynn helped to buck her up and get there, but she is under immense pressure, and she's still doing the dang right thing because she's a woman of God.
Yeah, she sure is. That's right.
No doubt. Speaking of elections, I know we're going a little off script here, Danielle, but speaking of elections, Matt, we had Colonel Conrad Reynolds on 2 or 3 weeks ago, and he discussed what he thought was good intel that we're likely to see a clarifying executive order from President Trump regarding these electronic voting machines. Is the fact that we have not, and I'm sure that is what Tulsi Gabbard wants based upon her public comments, regarding her skepticism about these machines. Certainly, President Trump has expressed it. Is there a possibility that that is also being blocked within the Trump administration?
A DOJ might be slow walking it, and I'll just put it this way: is that there's some folks in DOJ who, for years people have been saying what we now know to be true, and they were perceived as crying wolf, but now it's real, and DOJ now knows it's real, and they're still not acting with the alacrity that they need to for at least some folks inside DOJ. But I would say, from what I understand too, Tulsi, because of leaks that were occurring on, she's locked down ODNI. They're not sharing it with DHS, with DOJ. They are doing their thing. They're getting all that information to the president. So DOJ is kind of in the blind, and they're somewhat frustrated because in the first election EO came out, there were some issues that, again, with your legal background, had DOJ seen it, they could have maybe changed some paragraphs, words, sentences, because immediately Mark Elias saw some weak spots and targeted it. That maybe wouldn't have happened if DOJ had a cut on it before it went out the door. But there's concerns of from our own team. But interesting, you said what Conrad Reynolds said. Stephanie Lambert, she's also a hero and one of the attorneys for Tina, being targeted herself in Michigan for fighting for election integrity. She said the same thing last night. She goes, there's good things coming out, and please, so the elections will be okay. There's good things coming out soon. Please run for office. It's going to be free. It's going to be fair, especially at the local levels. Please, if you haven't done it, we need grassroots especially. Put your hat in the ring, run for office. These things are going to be fixed. And Stephanie's pretty tied in there, I know.
Amazing. Well, and kind of that creates a good bridge because Emerald Robinson and Peter Berniger have been reporting for the last, 2 weeks or so that there's now over a dozen whistleblowers from Serbia, Venezuela, Canada, China. The Serbian whistleblower, I believe, was specific to Dominion in Mesa County, where Tina, all this stuff went down with her. And then I believe Smartmatic was the Venezuelan was a Smartmatic whistleblower. He was dating back to the Chavez regime. This all has to fit together somehow. You can't tell me that this is just, scattershot.
No, it does. And even Peter said it last night. And I go back to, it's like Vujade all over again with Operation Fast and Furious. If you just looked at it in little snippets, it is as legal people would say, interesting but irrelevant or something. But if you look at it in toto, now you see what's going on. And to me, well, not to me, what is factually now understood by the right folks in the government, as Peter said, even the president, foreign interference in our election assisted by domestic accomplices. And I know there is somebody who was very close to Chavez. I mean, somebody like a national security advisor type level to Chavez, who's in U.S. custody. This person is naming names, and this is earlier in September. Juan, myself, Jim Marchant, some others, we were in D.C. meeting with some people, and this high-level person in U.S. custody was naming names, and one of those names was the head of Dominion. As far as people who were doing, Soros was another one. There was 3 people, and one has already been indicted, and it's going to get another indictment, I think, what we were told. And that guy was indicted for the Philippine Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, Smartmatic rigging the Filipino elections back in the day. So people are beginning to talk. There's interviews going on, but what we have to be careful of, even in that closed loop environment, leaks were getting out to like Tren de Aragua and the Cartel de Solis. So we still have a problem in our own government, and a lot of the folks we talked with who are briefing Tulsi and everything else are adamant that 50% of the seat needs to go. And the comments they made to us is, why does Radcliffe have 2 senior advisors who are Brennan acolytes and holdovers? And they posit, does Brennan still have more control over the CIA than Radcliffe right now?
Good grief. Chris, you're on mute.
A guy who's had his security clearance stripped.
But
it doesn't much matter. It doesn't much matter if you, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Danielle, what do you think? Danielle, should we put that transcript up there, that brief portion of the transcript, if
Yeah,
we
let me see
can?
if I can find it. I'd forgotten that.
And while you're doing this, because apparently, Matt, there's a whistleblower who's actually given sworn confidential testimony in a court proceeding regarding whether or not elections can be rigged in America. And it seems pretty clear. Have you looked at that transcript of that proceeding that Emerald Robinson posted?
I have not.
I can read it here.
I agree with you. You know, the folks that, and we first got briefed on this back in January, the folks who orchestrated this process, and people have to understand that Mark Cook is one of the best to articulate this in a way that the average person can say, oh, I get it, is it's not just the machines. It's everything from voter registrations to voter validation to the tabulation and the reporting. But the people who helped construct this diabolical process said essentially there's 14 entry points into an election ecosystem. If they can control 2 of the 14, they can flip an election, and they demonstrated it. But go ahead, Danielle.
Yeah. No, I was just going to read this top part. So this is the top of, I guess, a deposition with the witness. And it says, sir, do you have personal knowledge whether the election systems in the United States, the voting systems, can be manipulated by foreign agents? And the answer was the electoral systems of the United States can be manipulated by foreign agents or a third party. He goes on to ask if he's in physical danger. He said yes, and he's agreed to, they've agreed that his identity will be redacted to protect him going forward. So that one, Chris, I believe was that's the Smartmatic whistleblower. That's
Right.
the one
And
from
that
the
was
Chavez
the one,
regime.
exactly. And that was the one that was posted 6 days ago. Emerald Robinson said this whistleblower just testified. So obviously it's very recent. And this is a guy who apparently has knowledge and who has explicitly said that these machines can be manipulated. And it just seems like that's a pretty big deal, you know?
And
that's a
yes,
pretty big deal.
It's huge, and that's why, you know, the group, our coalition, some secretaries of state, election officials, judges, Professor Clements, Tim Canova, Mark Cook, Laura Shar, Hava Loudon, a whole host of people put together a proposed draft EO that I know Bannon's gotten and other folks in DOJ has gotten, and the folks briefed in Tulsa have gotten. And you're right. And the predicate to that was things the president can do, citing a national emergency, right? And we would advocate and articulate, we have a national election emergency. You have foreign interference
Indeed
in our elections, and Congress has already delegated to the president powers that he or she can, in this case, he can execute, invoking that which the Congress has already passed. And when we've talked, and I'm sure, Chris, you'll understand what I'm saying, we've talked to folks like Professor Clements, who are lawyers with Voter GA, or Tim Canova, another lawyer down in Florida, constitutional lawyer. They call that the Ohio Steel case, right? Truman did something, doing some executive order, and the Supreme Court said, when the president is aligned with the Congress, he's at the zenith of his power, right? When the Constitution doesn't explicitly say something, but Congress is agreeing with him, in this case would have pre-agreed with him, he's at the height of his power. And that's why everything we put out there, it was predicated on the president declaring a national emergency, certainly in our election system. The board has been infiltrated. Our election ecosystem has been infiltrated, both foreignly and domestically.
And I would go further to say that this isn't just an emergency. They are assaulting the United States. We are at war. We are under attack. We're under siege right now.
Yes.
Yeah. So the grounds,
when they say, well,
you
get what you
declare a
deserve,
national emergency seem to be there.
Yeah, I think so. And that's why I tell people when they say, well, people get what they deserve. You elected these people. No, did we really?
No.
I don't think so.
Yeah, it's so frustrating to me to hear people say that on kind of the mainstream news. I don't think people in our circles are saying that nonsense anymore, maybe here and there, but you get what you vote for is a straight bald-faced lie.
Yeah, that is absolutely the truth. And Let me ask you this last thing on this, Matt. Is there a chance that an investigation into Smartmatic or Dominion is being blocked in the Trump administration?
I don't know. Again, just harkening back to meetings we had in D.C. in early September, I know with new information that came out, new indictments were being levied against people. So I think it's kind of like let me put it this way. Maybe this makes it most sense. In this particular case with elections and with Tina and so forth, it appears it's like the typical government, right? It's a Leviathan stuck in molasses, and it's just not moving at the tempo Trump wants it to move. And I would say Trump's again right. When you're in a war, and we're in a war, I mean, people have to, I think your audience understands it. You have to move with what did Hegseth say at Quantico, right? He wants our military move with alacrity and ferocity. And right now, in this particular case, my perspective, my looking at it is DOJ. You've got great people in there who know all the facts now and want to go do the right things. And the bureaucratic process is just going along like Leviathan and molasses. And they will tell you, again, folks, good, trusted, patriotic folks in DOJ will tell you the shot clock is running. The primaries are coming. We got to get off our keisters and get this done.
Yeah, exactly.
Several weeks ago, maybe a couple of months ago now, Matt, it was my argument when we were getting all kinds of complaints that the indictments were not moving fast enough. My position then was that when you're talking about indictments on this level, the seriousness, the magnitude, the gravity, the positions of the defendants. I mean, you're talking about former presidents, former top level officials in the most powerful country in the world. My position was that once the trigger is pulled on indictments, you can't unpull it. And you've got to make sure your T's are crossed, your I's are dotted, not only because of the who is being charged and the seriousness of the charges, but the fact that these people are going to have the very best criminal defense lawyers in the world defending them. And so I'm still inclined to believe that that may be the case, knowing what it takes to be able to successfully prosecute a serious case on this level. But with each passing day and with each passing week, I'm becoming a bit more skeptical about the extent to which they're actually going to move forward with indictments against these bad actors.
You know what I would like to see, though, is I would love to see DOJ pull a Trump and completely flood the zone, because there's only so many attorneys, criminal attorneys at that level that can represent these crooks of the highest order. And if they're all in conflict, I mean, I would like there to become a rule of scarcity amongst the crooks not being able to get represented because there's so many of them.
Well, I think that's probably unlikely, because there are a lot of top level criminal defense lawyers out there, and with sort of the kind of money that they're going to be paid to do these cases, I think there'll be plenty of lawyers probably to go around. Look, I'm deriving some hope to some degree from the Comey indictment. He was a top-level official. At least he was indicted for 2 felonies, perhaps not everything he should have been charged with. But I'm deriving a faint glimmer of hope from that, and certainly I'm hoping that they will move forward. Matt, one last thing on this. I read from, perhaps it may have been Patrick Byrne, who said that Pam Bondi is essentially running the DOJ from Florida, shows up for press conferences and makes public statements, but that it really is Todd Blanche who is running the Department of Justice for all intents and purposes. Do you tend to agree with that?
I don't know. I don't know if she's doing that. I know Patrick has said that. Heck, I know Bannon has said that, and others is like, hey, how about a little less Fox News appearances and more, getting stuff done. Yeah, I don't know if she's commuting for only important things back and forth. Folks who do know her from Florida, some good friends of Juan's. One I met in D.C. They're from Florida. They have absolute faith and confidence in her. Peter Tickton thinks that she's completely supportive, loves, and is aligned with President Trump. So I don't know if it's Bondi as much as Blanche, but it's just perplexing. I mean, that issue, Trump. I mean, good stuff on the Secretary of Health and Human Services did, but you had the CEO of Pfizer that's driving the base bat bongo crazy in the White House. You got him in there.
Right.
The stuff they're doing with Palantir, and so it's like, in the words of good friend of mine, retired General Holt. He says, like, we're taking two steps forward and one step back, 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And I think, and I'll leave it with this on this topic, is that you risk public sentiment analysis, meaning that you have to have the population with you, right, as you go through this thing, as Juan would say, so that you might have civil unrest, but not civil war. And I think right now, certainly on the DOJ side, things are not keeping up with public sentiment, and the public grassroots is getting significantly upset. And you risk, I'm putting a political calculation into this, you're risking 2026 turnout if folks think that, well, we just got the same old crap. What difference does it make?
Well, exactly. Yes. That's such a good point. And it really is to me, the dispositive evidence about whether or not the administration is serious about ensuring that justice is done here will be if we begin to see serious indictments. I mean, when I heard President Trump in the Oval Office, this is a couple of months back, I mean, he absolutely blistered Obama himself. President Obama, as though President Obama was just some thug off the street who needs to be prosecuted and put in jail for the rest of his life. I mean, so I don't know whether I don't think he's the kind of man who just plays word games, but President Trump has expressed the fact that he thinks Obama needs to be indicted for the most serious criminal offenses against the United States there are. And so I certainly don't believe that the delay on these indictments has, as you suggested earlier on other things, it really is an effort to, I think, abort or impede President Trump's desires, rather than to facilitate what he wants, because he's been very clear about what he wants.
He has, and I would offer something that Trump said. I'm going back maybe a week or two. I think it was after the Truth Social about Pam. He just said, you got the evidence. I'm paraphrasing. Get the indictment, and then if they're guilty, they're guilty. If they're not, they're not. But at least adjudicate the damn matter.
Yeah.
And I think that would be all the American people really need. The American people, from our vantage point, the way we view the Constitution is the same way that Thomas Jefferson viewed the Constitution and our founders. Trial by jury is the last anchor and only hope by which we can be held accountable, or the government can be held accountable to the principles of its Constitution. So if the matter goes forward and is properly adjudicated and these defendants are found not guilty, the American people are not going to hold the Trump administration responsible for that. We just want to see good faith action and a vigorous effort to try and make right all of the horrible criminality and persecution that we saw over 4 years with Biden and even during Trump's first administration. That's all we want to see.
Yeah, but how are we going to see it? You see these judges, they're so crooked. They're absolutely crooked. You can't you said properly adjudicate the matter. It cannot be properly adjudicated with crooked and dirty judges spread throughout and across this country. You see the way that they've handled all of Trump's EOs. You've seen the way that they handle any Republican that looks at them the wrong way.
Well, that is true, Danielle. There are corrupt judges, even on the federal level, which was designed to be prevented by our founding fathers. They were specifically designed to be inoculated from the kind of political pressure that would create corruption. They're appointed for life. But unfortunately, as we've seen, there is almost the same level of corruption on the federal level, federal courts, Article 3 courts, as there is on the state level, where judges are elected. So I agree with you. The only response I would make to that would be shrewd prosecutors know how to handle cases, even with corrupt trial judges. And as long as you have a jury, there are certain evidentiary rules that the judge has to follow. And of course, if he commits reversible error, then fortunately, most of our appellate courts, many of the judges on our appellate courts were appointed by President Trump. So hopefully there could be some relief there. But I do tend to agree with you that it's a hard call with a lot of these judges. I mean, look at the January 6th federal judge. That's a perfect example.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah,
That's what, if I could
agree.
read something, this was a couple of general officers who were retired, who gave some insight into Hegseth and Trump having all the flag officers meet at Quantico, right?
Yeah.
The election rigging, I'm going to paraphrase, the election rigging in the U.S. and globally completely eclipses any other global consideration except perhaps a direct Chinese invasion of Taiwan. We will very likely not have another chance to defeat the current 50-state 5GW attack against America unless we unravel that in the next year. A, military leadership is being brought away from their commands under the pretext of reinstilling the warrior ethos to weed out wokeness, assure presidential chain of command, and ensure military traitors like General Milley are not returned to the positions to foment mischief and even outright insurrection. B, military attention is being refocused by Trump on the Western Hemisphere and the Americas to confront the asymmetrical warfare being conducted against us by our adversaries, domestic and foreign. C, and actually Professor Clements thinks there's going to be a bifurcated approach, and you'll see what I'm talking about here. Much of the last 8 months has been about exposing the scale and scope of infiltration and subversion of our republic to get buy-in of the American people, public sentiment analysis. The distortion of our republic has become so great that it may not be possible to right it without military intervention and tribunals, which would be foolish to start unless you have some confidence in the outcome. Even Professor Clements has now said some of the egregious things, the sedition and conspiracy, are going to have to be done by military tribunals because the Article 3 courts cannot proceed at pace they need to proceed at.
Wow, that is absolutely extraordinary that you would have these extremely serious felony cases being tried by military tribunals instead of by Article 3 federal judges. And I would suspect that Professor Clements would probably say also one of the reasons for that, in addition to their perhaps inability to proceed as quickly as they need to get this done, perhaps because of some of the corruption that Danielle alluded to earlier, that perhaps it's just unfortunately very difficult to get justice in federal court for really anything that President Trump really wants in so many places in the country, especially in the venue where many of these cases are likely to be tried, which is right there in Washington,
right
D.C.
Right there in the swamp.
So, yeah.
And not the good swamp of Louisiana.
Right there. Well, yeah. We
have both kinds here.
Yeah, we have both. We have both kinds, but the kind we like are when we're out in the swamp lassoing alligators, Matt.
Yes,
we only do that couple of times.
You got some hardy people.
Next time you come down, we'll have to do that.
People who hunt alligators, God bless you. That's some great bravery.
Yeah. It took me a while to domesticate the one that I have.
Yeah. Can we kind of continue our line of thought down the line? So let's say someone like an Obama is indicted for treason and sedition. Let's say he goes to a military tribunal. And let's say that they find out that actually he wasn't even rightfully elected in the first place. Does that give us the ability then to finally wipe out these fraudulent judges that he would have appointed? It would negate every single act that he did, would it not?
You know, I that's a constitutional issue we have to look at. To make it even, put a little more spice in the gumbo, is at Quantico, there's a little clip, I don't know if I sent it to you. Trump said, I was 45, 46, and 47. It was 45, 46, and 47. Interesting.
Yeah, that really is interesting. And of course, that would implicate the legitimacy of Biden's reign, not Obama's. But yeah, it certainly applies. And well, I mean, I can tell you that, it seems to be pretty clear now that for 70% of Biden's administration, he wasn't even in control of anything. He may not have even been cognitively capable of making decisions, including many of the executive orders. But that's a really interesting question, Danielle. If, in fact, a military tribunal determined that President Obama, for whatever reason, was not legitimately elected as the Constitution requires, absolutely, it would render null and void every single action that he took as president, would become null and void on its face. Absolutely illegitimate. What an interesting question to ask. Matt, what about this? I'm so interested in your opinion on this Act Blue and this WinRed money laundering. We had Draza Smith and her father, Walter, not her father, but the father of a friend of ours, Walter Charlton, who's a lawyer who's been studying this for a long, long time, about these laundered, fraudulent donations, these very suspicious donations that are being funneled through these platforms, Act Blue, WinRed, to the tune of millions and millions and millions of dollars.
And they're laundering a lot.
It's been established at this point.
We get the feds involved. They're
Yeah.
laundering money through real estate.
Okay, through real estate as well.
Let me show you something that I shared with some folks about that, if I could. And I just put it this way and see what you think about this. I shared it with somebody very important, and I said, uncovering and dismantling the previous system, I'm talking about Act Blue, WinRed, no less than 20 years after the fact of how they started, is only being allowed because it is no longer required as new, more effective techniques are now being employed.
Dang, Matt, that's terrible.
What? Wow. Unbelievable.
And that other side does not.
So we're in whack-a-mole.
They don't make stupid ass mistakes. They're willing to give it up and have all the attention over there because they got a whole different way of financing this ball game.
Yeah. They do. And go ahead, Danielle.
That's one of the things I talked to Sean Taylor about yesterday. He came on For the Love of Freedom.
Great hero, great guy.
We were saying, yeah, absolutely. He's so great. And we were talking about this idea that, the U.S. aid money has been cut off, so perhaps some of the inflow has been shut down. But by this point, they have their entire ecosystem that's creating compound interest, that's moving money around. Perhaps they don't even need that. The conversation was in the context of the federal funds coming in and not necessarily being needed anymore. But the same could be said true of different avenues to get the money into the campaigns.
Working as Juan's chief of staff, things that I've gotten to be aware of, and he's trying to meet with folks in D.C. right now and Florida. There's a whole level of finance. We're talking gold and trillions of dollars at an off-ledger accounts all throughout this planet. That it's the average person would have no clue, and that's how that globalist WEF City of London structure works. They don't need that. This is for the minions that are Act Blue and WinRed. They've got this. They plug into this whole completely off-ledger money that we have no clue about. No clue. And I've seen people, we were in meetings here. I've seen it. I see a person whose life is in danger, trying to get that person to the States. Trump actually tried to call this person January 2nd of this year. We're trying to make that connection. And let's use that money intended for bad to be for good as we deflate the Fed and bring it under the Treasury. And that's what they want to do. This money that's out there is Fed money, Fed-derived money that is being used to target the Republic by the globalists. So let's use their money and either deflate it or reallocate it to us under Treasury control.
Wow. So are you suggesting here, Matt, that this Act Blue and WinRed money laundering scheme is small potatoes?
Yes, exactly. I can tell you that from what I've seen.
Because we're talking about a lot of potatoes. Because we're talking about
it's important. But, I mean, just with one person, over 800 bank accounts throughout the world, over 40 in the U.S., 1,500 tons of gold. I mean, this level
just one person. You're saying that's connected to one person.
But this person wants to help Trump.
Wow.
This person wants to meet Trump and help Trump, help the United States, help freedom and liberty, and not the others. This person... Biden tried to get to this person. Obama tried to get to this person. And this person has been in secure positions because they're concerned. But yes, as big as Act Blue and WinRed, and certainly what Sean Taylor and those guys are finding, which is critical, that is one way. But there's a level above that. I mean, I recommend to the audience, follow E.M. Burlingame, Echo Mike E.M. Burlingame on X. It's called the Sport of Kings. Soros is a top manager. He's not even up. He doesn't even compete with these people. He's just a forward facing face. These people, you don't even see them. You don't even know them. These people hide in the shadows. They have these trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars. I've seen it. I've seen the accounts. I've seen it with my eyes. It exists. And Trump tried to call this person, and it's just one person. January 2nd of this year.
And you know, Matt, it's so disgusting. It's so absolutely heartbreaking and disgusting. You look at the way some Americans are forced to live, right? You think about especially high disaster prone areas like where I live. Some people are living in abject poverty. People are living in truly horrific conditions. And it's the way that our government has been hijacked and run probably since 1913, just with an increasing in intensity and severity since then, since the creation of the Fed. But the prices are out of control. Energy prices are getting out of control. We have to pay more and more and more to get less and less and less. And then there are people who just sit up there controlling the levers of power and controlling such vast sums of money. And it's absolutely disgusting.
And what you're seeing,
It is.
Some of these people there who weren't part of this, maybe people in their family were, and now they're trying to do the right thing. What they're trying to do is get those funds on Ledger, right, back into the global system. And something Juan is working closely with is doing it in such a way that it comes under now control of the Treasury, not control of the Fed. And I think, no inside baseball knowledge, but I think what you're seeing Trump trying to do, wipe away the year 1913, get rid of the Fed, get rid of the IRS. You get rid of those two things, and in the words of, as you mentioned, Patrick Byrne, the great Patrick Byrne, I love what he says, my idea of great government is deliver my mail and get the hell off my porch.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that. And, it was Charlie Kirk back in 2019 when the government actually shut down. He said, that's a really good thing. We have way too many federal employees. And while you're at it, you need to abolish the IRS. So Kirk was on board with that. But I want to get drill back down. I certainly appreciate your point that the amount of money that we're talking about on a higher level that's being used nefariously does make the Act Blue and the WinRed illicit activities seem small. Relative to the ordinary American citizen and the ordinary Louisiana citizen, we're talking about a tremendous amount of money here that's funding these campaigns. It's been established that the people who are purportedly making the donations, the retired people, the single moms, that sort of thing, are not making the donations. They're having their identity expropriated, and these repeated suspicious small dollar donations often going from one state to the campaign or the candidate in another state. I mean, these things are facially suspicious, but it's being done on a big level through Act Blue and WinRed, Act Blue to Democrats, WinRed to Republicans. And the issue that keeps coming up here is we know we can fairly assume that the campaign committees for these candidates and these politicians themselves are aware that this money laundering is going on. They have to have knowledge that this is illicit. They have to know these people who are purportedly making these donations are not actually doing it, which is a felony, to expropriate someone else's identity for this purpose. My question to you is, and if you're in a position to answer it, to what extent can actual knowledge of this illicit activity be imputed to the actual candidates or be imputed to the actual politicians? Or do they have plausible deniability there? We're running for office. We're trying to serve the public. We don't know what's coming in. We use what's there. But is there a nexus? At some point, can you presume that there has to be a nexus of knowledge between the candidates themselves or the politicians themselves and their campaign organizations?
Chris, I would say from what I have learned in the last 5 years is oftentimes the candidate especially if they're new, they're relying on their campaign finance chair, right? So they're not looking at the finance chair is doing all that stuff, and they don't follow it as closely. But what I would say is that now that it's come out, and now you see these things with Win Red and Act Blue, you can't use the excuse I didn't know. You now know, and I would advocate, if you're a decent politician, and I think there are decent politicians, and more importantly, as a citizen, don't donate to Act Blue. Do not donate to Win Red. If you like somebody running for office, donate to them directly. Write a check to their campaign directly. Do not run it through an Act Blue or a Win Red or any third party. Do it to them directly. Because you know something, even if all is above board and fair, I've watched where the National Republican congressional campaign or the counterpart in the Senate, they'll raise money, and then they have somebody they like because of favoritism, and they'll flow the money to a candidate instead of making sure it's going to where it was thought to be going, right? So don't donate to the NRCC or the SRC. Donate to the candidate personally. Do not allow a third party, whether it's in the Congress or a private entity, you like that person, donate that person directly.
Yeah, absolutely. Otherwise, you're outsourcing your voice and your money. You have no idea where your money lands.
And they take these huge percentages from these people. Even if everything else is above board, they're taking a huge percentage out. No, more wholesale, less retail. You want to help a candidate, one, run yourself, or if you don't. Number two, give the money directly to that candidate that you think aligns best with your values.
Yeah. It's a great point. I tell you what, you got to give great credit to Peter Bernegger for the yeoman's work that he's done to expose this. I mean, the guy truly, truly has shed tremendous light on this activity here. And
Sean,
and I agree with you, man. Yeah.
Some months
Sean,
back,
yeah,
Sean and Mark Fincham and Joe Flynn were in D.C., I think, when Ed Martin was still the acting attorney, U.S. attorney for D.C., and they briefed Ed Martin on this specifically several months ago. It was Joe Flynn, it was Sean Taylor, and it was Mark Fincham.
It's a great lineup.
Yeah. Matt, Danielle may have something to follow up here, but this is my last question for you today. What is the likelihood, handicapping it, gut feeling, that within the next week or two, next month or so, we're going to get an executive order from the Trump administration regarding these electronic voting computers in America for federal elections?
My gut feel, I mean, I don't have firsthand knowledge, is that October, we'll see it in October. And I think it's not just going to be the machines, because the audience got to realize it's not just the machines. The machines are an aspect, but as only Mark Cook can really articulate it better than I'll try to do it justice. It all works together, right? You have to have the headroom with the registrations. You have to have the poll book manipulations and the centralized data. Then you have the tabulations and then the reporting. And I think you're going to see an executive order that encompasses all of those, and hopefully something that we were requested to do, and we put our minds to it and sent something up the chain on creating a billet in the White House, kind of like a national security advisor, but you are working just for the president. You have the authority from the president. You can task DOJ and DHS and the intelligence communities, and you are the person overseeing the security and assurance of federal elections. And you, in my mind, that'd be somebody. A dream team for me would be like having Ed Martin, Mac Warner, and Professor Clements all in that office working together. That would be wonderful. And Mark Cook in there is the technical guy that's really helping them all. But we've put that up there because right now, what you might have is what you see in your life sometimes, or in business, right? Everyone thought someone was doing it and nobody is. You need a designated person that corrects this mess and then transitions us back to something post declaration of national emergency to normalize our elections again, so we the people control our damn elections and not some third party vendor and some foreign influence.
Great point. Great point. Probably the best point of the show that you've made, Matt. You've made some good ones. When the federal government assumes temporary emergency power, there's always a danger, no matter what the issue is, that they're not going to return the government to normal constitutional operation. And you saw it with FDR, with the Great Society program. FDR was adamant that this is an emergency action taken under extraordinarily exigent circumstances. These programs are not meant to be a permanent fixture of government. And guess what they became? A permanent fixture of government. And we have to remember that the government, even beneficent governments, never return power voluntarily. So your point about making sure that we do that is just so critical. And I'm always concerned whenever, even under the best of circumstances, the government assumes emergency powers. Not that it's not necessary. I think that it is necessary. And I believe it's probably necessary in the case of our elections. But we've got to make sure that we don't stay there. So that's a brilliant point you made.
Yes, bingo. We cannot stay there. And you're absolutely right. Yes.
Well, Matt, it's always a pleasure to have you with us. And it's not only because you're a U.S. Marine, sir, but that's one of the reasons why we love you. And we're always blessed to have you on. Keep us in the loop on what's going on, and thank you for all your work. And please tell Mark Cook hello for us.
Yeah. And it's been too long since we had you on, so we'll have to have you soon.
I know he's doing some great work with some good folks, both in Texas and in Colorado. I've never seen a more hardworking guy than Mark Cook. And little tidbit for the audience as we go out, a little bit of levity, like to leave a little levity. If you need a garage door fixed or your RV or your dishwasher, Mark is truly a Renaissance man.
He is. We had the pleasure of eating dinner at our house one evening with Mark Cook when he came down to Louisiana for a meeting that we had with the Attorney General. And I was just blown away by not only his wealth of knowledge, but as you said, his energy. I mean, he really has Trump-like energy. There's no question about that. And what a great American he is. God bless
Amen.
You, Matt. And we will talk to you soon, sir.
God bless you all. Thank you so much. Have a great.
Thank you, Matt. We'll talk to you soon. Chris, it's always a pleasure to have him. I know we struggled a little bit. It seems like there were some connectivity issues on his end that caused a little bit of a delay. So hopefully people were able to enjoy that conversation.
Yeah, I hope so too. And I hope that he's right about his gut feeling about the executive order. And, Danielle, I do have the sneaky suspicion, not really verified, that what Tulsi Gabbard probably wants with regard to our election system and the concerns that she's expressed perhaps are not being codified in the form of an executive order because of quislings within the Trump administration who do not want it to happen. I hope that is not the case. And I hope that we get something out soon because we need it. Because as you know, for immediate purposes right here in Louisiana, we're still trying tenaciously to stop the investment of a large amount of our money in new voting machines. And it looks like at this point, the only thing that's probably going to stop our Secretary of State is an executive order, as Draza Smith said.
Yeah. Well, if an executive order even stops her, I mean, you would think that it would have to, but I'm not convinced, Chris. She's behaved with complete and total. She's ignored everything that's come out of Trump's office as it relates to elections. She's acted like it doesn't even matter.
Well, as Dr. Russ has told us many times, our election systems are considered critical infrastructure, which gives the president executive authority to issue an executive order on that issue. If he comes out with an executive order prohibiting the use of electronic voting computers in federal elections, and she goes forward despite that, then her problems at that point go from mere political problems to criminal problems. And I'm not sure that as brazen as she is, even she is willing to cross that bridge. We'll see.
We will see.
We'll see. We'll see what happens with it. But
I guess the point is, in the meantime, that you can bet her foot is hard on the gas to get it done. because there's that tiny window of time between right now, after those demonstrations happened, and the moment that President Trump releases his executive order that we expect to be coming to outline that to outlaw the use of these in federal elections, at least. We'll just see. We will see, because I'm not convinced. I mean, she made her own way very, very clear and smooth through the legislature this session. And I don't know, Chris.
Yeah.
I'm feeling very frustrated with the whole situation. I'm feeling like the ignoring has hit a different level, and I don't know.
Well,
She'll be in some deep water, some deep trouble. Hot water was what I was looking for. She'll be in hot water if she does move forward, but we'll see.
we'll see. At this point, the way I see it, Danielle, it's becoming increasingly obvious because of our platform and the platform of others that Nancy Landry's administration is directly at odds with the desires of the Trump administration with regard to our electronic voting system. With every day that passes that she continues to move forward with this, I think her political problems become worse. But from a legal perspective, because there has not been an outright prohibition of, computer-based voting systems in federal elections yet, she doesn't yet have a legal problem necessarily. But if we do get an executive order that clarifies this, that expressly prohibits it, at that point, if she goes forward, she has a legal problem. And we'll see whether or not she's as brazen as you seem to think that she is. And maybe she is. We'll see.
Maybe she is. Yeah, I have a couple of announcements before we close out, Chris. Tomorrow's Friday, right? Friday and Saturday in Grandview, Texas is the Stay Awake America Tour. It's got an incredible lineup, including Doc Chambers, Dr. Brian Artis, Dr. Judy Miktovitz, and J.J. Carroll, Trennis Evans. We've had a couple of those folks on the show and more. You can find out more about that if you're in the area at stayawakeamerica.com. And Tuesday, we will have 2 segments, so we'll be mixing things up a little bit in terms of our format. We will have City Judge Candidate Brenden Craig join us for the first half hour, and the second half hour will be the event organizer, one of the organizers of this Stay Awake America tour. Amy Young will be joining us to talk about the tour, and we'll find out if they're going to be coming to Louisiana and where else this tour will be headed. So that's all from me, Chris, on the announcement front.
Just want to add to that briefly. I've known Brenden Craig, Danielle, for a long, long time. Know him to be an honorable lawyer. I think he would be a good and a fair judge. Early voting for the Baton Rouge City Court race starts September 27th, ends on October 4th, and Election Day is October 11th. So I would just encourage people to seriously consider voting for Brenden Craig. I think he'd be a good and fair judge. Other than that, I think we're in good shape today, other than to say I know that we can count on all of our listeners and all of our current supporters to share the State of Freedom today with at least one friend, one colleague, one coworker, one associate, and subscribe to the State of Freedom, donate to the State of Freedom, advertise with the State of Freedom, because it really does help us. As you said, Danielle, we are a community-supported political podcast, and we are getting the voice of Louisiana citizens out across the state more and more every day. And knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. So let the State of Freedom be on your lips every day. Also support and donate to LACAG, our advocacy group, my advocacy group, as we continue to clean out the rhinos from the state legislature. Danielle, we're going on a rhino sweep throughout the state of Louisiana right now, naming names of legislators who have betrayed Louisiana citizens on a whole host of issues that directly affect us, to inform their voters in their districts of what they're doing so they can make an informed decision when they go vote. And before LACAG came along, Danielle, I don't think there was any organization doing that. So it's a niche that we are very, very happy to fill. So support us and help us to level the playing field as we battle.
It's more important than ever because we're about to be in a position to truly get these people out once and for all. So we need to know who they are. The people of the state need to know who they are.
The people of the state need to know who they are, for sure. Knowledge is power, as I believe Sir Francis Bacon said. Knowledge is power, so help us to expand it. And Danielle, as always, in the words of one of my biggest heroes, the late, great William F. Buckley Jr., inveighing, we shall.
Awesome. The secret to losing weight 2 times faster has gone viral. See the transformations hundreds of thousands of men, women, and teens are experiencing around the world with the Slenderiiz drops. These homeopathic hormone-balancing drops are proven to control appetite, support thyroid function, improve energy, boost mood, and increase metabolic rate. To learn more about the drops or other incredible natural wellness and lifestyle products, email me at Danielle@freedomstate.us or visit the Shop Our Partners page at freedomstate.us. Hey, Danielle Walker here. I'd love for you to check out my online boutique, Luxe Lion. My mission for Luxe Lion is to showcase innovative African designers and sustainable, mission-driven brands. To do that, I bring you stunningly beautiful handcrafted jewelry and accessories from some of my absolute favorite places on earth. Small batch wholesale for storefronts is also available. Join me in celebrating African artistry and shop now at luxelion.us. Use promo code FREEDOM for an additional 10% off your purchase. Thanks for joining us today on the State of Freedom. Be sure and check out the show notes for this episode. You can always go there and find the calls to action and resources mentioned in the show, and you can find out more information about our advertisers there as well. If you want to learn more about us or support our work, visit freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit LACAG.org. We'll see you next time. God bless.